A very, very, very good evening. Warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Norman Goodfellows, and welcome to a Thursday evening celebration. Now, it's generally a fairly celebratory show because there are glasses of wine in hand and a great industry and great people to raise those glasses to. But today in particular, we're looking at two moments worth opening two particular bottles of wine for. The first of them being a stalwart of the South African red wine scene, and the second being some of South Africa's iconic bubbles, although alongside of it, a rather nice estate from Constantia as well. And if that all sounds a little mysterious, well, let me clarify. This year is a very important year for a wine that sits in, I'd say, the majority of South African households at least once during the year, in many cases, many more times than that. And that is Nederburg's Baronne. It is such a benchmark South African red blend, and is one that this year celebrates 50 years of putting smiles on people's faces. And it is still a wine that delivers great quality for a ridiculous price. And many people are extremely happy for that. So Zinaschke Steyn, who certainly wasn't making it when it first came out, but is overseeing red wine down at Nederburg at the moment, will be joining us in just a moment to look back at how this wine came apart. A rather special gentleman who played a very important role in its development and where that wine is now, as well as a bit of an update from Nederburg, where there always seems to be something rather cool happening. And cool things also happen around our other guest. He's a cool magnet and just generally very cool. He has started a new job in the wine industry. This is very similar to Inter Miami landing Lionel Messi, because Mandla Mathonsi has joined the team at Graham Beck and by association Steenberg, and I think Pensis as well. We'll check with him in a moment, as national sales manager and overseeing the brands across the country. Somebody I spend a lot of time with. He does some work with the Wine Squad, and he's a real natural on camera. And so we'll find out about the new role, but also about a selection of brands that are so important in the greater South African wine community. So Zinaschke and Patson coming up in just a moment on what is a busy and exciting week of wine. There have already been a few releases. Had some wine from Telmont earlier on this week. Justin Mead was out from Paris with a brand that's owned by Leonardo DiCaprio and is particularly pleasing to drink, but also very focused on the sustainability and environmental impact of the wine, both in terms of the manufacture, but also in the packaging and delivery. And that's coming up in the magazine show in the next few weeks. And tomorrow I'll be joining Donovan Roll and the team at Great Domains for lunch at Marble and a celebration of the new releases from Donovan, the giant of the Swartland. It continues to make such exceptional wine. He's terrifying the first time you meet him, and then you realize just a really big teddy bear who makes extremely good wine. So I'll give you some news on the new roll releases on the show next week. In a moment, we go Nederburg, we go Graham Beck, we go Steenberg, but for now, a quick look at some latest wine news. Well, this is coming up at the end of the month. This is the 27th of July. Quoin Rock and Norog, the chance to drink some wine. Two labels, one winemaker, this is Skulk, who makes the wine, and two estates who, I don't, in fairness, I don't think they see quite as much airtime as perhaps they deserve. And Skulk, who's come in from the Breda River Valley prior to this, he's now been at Quoin Rock making the Nordic wines for a few years now, is somebody who's a lovely guy, but also a very gifted winemaker. And I'll be tasting with him, introducing you alongside Skulk to the selection of wines from both ranges. As always, Chef Mbali and Chef Jason will have a range of food there for you. And it's all just a really good evening. It costs you something daft, like 100 Rand, all of which gets donated to charity. That's just to make sure that people who do sign up do come along. And gee, do they. And we've had a full house, every single one, for the last couple of months. And I'm sure it'll be the same at the end of the month. Quoin Rock and Nordic, head over to the Norman Goodfellows website, ngf.coza, and book your ticket before they fill up. And come and join us for a lovely evening of wine tasting and some pretty good food as well. And the art of wine, I was talking to the Guild team earlier on today. That artwork, that is all, as I've mentioned on the show before, all AI, those glasses you see on screen. And there's a story behind them, a story linked to each winemaker who forms part of the Cape Winemakers Guild auction showcase, the guild itself. Those wines will be on auction the first weekend in October, but you'll get a sneak preview 24th of August down in Cape Town at the International Convention Centre, and the 30th of August at the showcase that is happening in Johannesburg, and that is at the Nedbank Atrium down in Sandton. 2 evenings where you get the chance to not only drink wine that is made in very limited abilities and wine that the winemakers themselves believe is an exceptional expression of both their own winemaking ability, but also their terroir. It is also the opportunity to just meet them, get to know them, to chat to them. And that, to me, is just as valuable as drinking the actual wine. Combine them, you've got a terrific evening. So 24th of August in Cape Town and the 30th of August in Johannesburg. Get to those for a really, really good night out. And then this is almost at an end. It closes a little later on tonight. It is the world's correction. It closes next Monday. Getting ahead of myself. It is Thursday's show. It's not Monday's show. These are the NFTs representing 6 of the great names in international wine. From Australia, Penfolds Grange. From California, Harlan and Screaming Eagle. And from France, Chateau d'Yquem and their celebrated sweet wine, which is a misnomer, really, because it's so much more than just sweet wine, alongside of 2 of the really big guns, Chateau Mouton Rothschild, as well as Domaine Romani Conti. Wine from all of those on sale. Big numbers being asked. This is not, oh, well, toss a few around at this morgue with some wine. They're going to ask you for a big number, but you're going to be rewarded with some very, very big wine. And that is over at the Strauss platform at the moment. Auction underway, finishes on Monday. Right, well, let's head into our night of celebration. I very much doubt there is anybody watching the show who hasn't had at least one glass of Nederburg Baronne at some point or another. It is such a part of the South African wine furniture, and 50 years this year. So a warm welcome to Zinaschke Steyn, and thank you so much for joining the show on what is a really cool and important time for the Nederburg brand, with the Baronne wine in particular. So warm welcome to you, and a warm welcome to Patson, who's become a really good friend in Johannesburg. We spent a lot of time drinking wine together, and very happily so. Guys, welcome to you both. Lovely to have you on the show, and both with big smiles, and understandably so. Zinaschke, 50 years for Nederburg Baronne. Have you stopped and kind of taken that in and realized that you're the custodian now of something that's been going for half a century?
Yes. Hi, Dan. Yes. Just thank you very much for having us on the show. It's always lovely chatting to you. And yes, you are 100% correct. At the beginning of the year, when we put the 2022 vintage together, after we were done, I actually did take a moment and just stepped back and thought, what a huge privilege and an honor it is to be the winemaker and to be part of the team that is part of this legacy that has been ongoing for 50 years, and to follow in the footsteps of Günter Brosel himself. It's just amazing.
Now, before we talk about the wine itself, you mentioned a name that was going to come up pretty quickly on tonight's show, whatever happened, and that is Günter Brosel. He is such an important part of South Africa's wine history. He's got a bit of that mad scientist look to him in that particular photo. And I don't think that's completely wrong, because there was a great sense of adventure and experimentation to what he did. For people who don't know Günter Brosel, who don't realize the impact he had on South African wines, give us a little bit of a history, who this man was and why he was quite so important.
Yes, so Günter was the cellar master from 1956 until 1989, if I remember correctly, 33 years of his life. And he was also the first winemaker to produce a noble late harvest style wine. And that was only allowed to be sold at the Nederburg auction. So he played a huge role in terms of that. And then ultimately between the 1960s and 1970s, we had a huge shortage of red wine in South Africa because of an unfathomable falling over my own words. First, that South Africans developed for red wines during that period. And that is also where the idea of Baronne came from. So Günther set out to make a wine to quench this thirst, and he had this idea of making an accessible, affordable, soft-textured wine made to be drunk every day, but it also had to give a sense of nobility to your everyday wine drinking. And so he went forth and started with Cabernet Sauvignon, which will always be in the leading role with Baronne, so the noble cab, aka the king of reds. And then deciding on the cultivar to blend with this, he went with Shiraz to add that fleshier, spicier notes to the blend. And ultimately, this wine was made to be drunk and enjoyed every day, and it was also made in the style that it would be easily accessible, easily drinking quite early, after early release.
It's the kind of blend we've now got used to seeing in Australia. We mentioned the Penfolds Grange earlier. Well, it's more the Shiraz, but the Shiraz Cab blend with that kind of bigger, juicier Shiraz is a real feature of the Australian wine industry. This was probably the groundbreaking blend of its kind here in South Africa. How much did it change, in as much as you know, the South African wine industry? How much did it change people's approach to and attitude to drinking this sort of wine?
I think Günther pretty much hit the mark when he set out and produced the first vintage, because to be honest, no fancy advertising campaigns were followed, no big launches. He just released the wines. And as soon as people started drinking it, it just was a major hit from the start. And I think a big attribute, or what this can be attributed to, is the fact that Günther was the son of a cooper and also a trained cooper himself. So he knew the importance, obviously, of the fruit you use in winemaking, but also then the impact of the wood that he wanted to have on this blend. And in the older days, he actually made use of the bigger foederers, wooden vats, to give that softer wood impact and just a lovely texture to the wine.
I'm reading at the moment Peter Vinding-Deer's brilliant book. I'd read about half of it when I had him on the show a couple of months ago, and I'm almost finished wrapping it up. And many is the times, Zinaschke, when he talks about how he wanted to do something new, and it took a bit of persuasion to convince the owner of the estate or the people he was working on, say, yes, okay, Peter, have a go at that. Again, in as much as you know, because you're probably a couple of generations on now from Günther, how much was he pushing the boundaries as a winemaker? How much did he have to persuade people that this was something that really needed to be done?
I think the climate, the wine drinking climate, and the shortage of the red wines actually played in his favor during that time. And he's quite, what's the word now? Adamant when he wants his way. And it doesn't take a lot for him to persuade someone. So I don't think he really had to fight that hard to get this idea off the ground because of that climate, like I said, of shortage of wine. But also during that time, there was actually a shortage of red grapes as well, because about 80% of South Africa's vineyards were planted under white wines or white grape cultivars. But luckily, Günther also had the correct contacts to make sure that he could source the grapes, the Cabernet and the Shiraz grapes, that was even more scarce at that stage, to create this wine that he had in mind.
And that kicked off something that has now chalked up its 50th anniversary. We'll come back to Zinaschke a little later and find out where that wine has got to now. Mr. Mathonsi, welcome to the show. Lovely to see you. I've got absolutely no doubt that more than just one or two glasses of Nederburg Baronne have passed through that celebrated palate of yours over the years.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Dan. Look, I think that Nederburg Baronne has become an iconic wine, you know. So it's one of those wines that you find everywhere, even on wine lists. It's almost everywhere. So well done to them, and congratulations on their 50th birthday.
Just before we dive particularly into your new role and the terrific brands that you're stewarding over the next while, how important, whether it is a Nederburg Baronne or Chateau Libertas or Mirlas Rubicon, irrespective of the space in terms of price, how important is it for us as a South African wine industry to have these brands that are so instantly recognizable? The moment we see them, we know what we're getting, we know it's reliable, we know if we buy that, it is money well spent.
No, look, you always need to have an iconic wine like that in a wine country, and I think they've done well in terms of positioning the wine, and also telling the story as well. Because wine is all about stories, so it's very, very important to tell the right story and also to have your own character as well. And I think that's what they've done very, very well. So it's easy to pick it up on the shelves. It's easy to pick it up in a wine list. And also, it's one of those easy drinking red blends that you just buy a bottle of that after a long day in the office. And when you get home, you just open a bottle of that while you are preparing your meal. So it's very, very important. And I think they've done well to put South Africa wine industry in the map, as well. And I think it's one of those big wines that will never, ever disappear in any ways.
I suspect that possibly my daughter, who turns 9 today and tells me she's going to be running the show, but change it to Erin Really Likes Wine. Maybe in 50 years' time, she'll be celebrating 100 years of it with future generations of the Steyn family making wine. Who knows where it will go? It's certainly got that kind of name, as does the Bubbles, of which, Patson, you are now the big boss, looking after the Graham Beck brand. Where is the line for you, Patson, between, gee, this is exciting, I'm looking after Graham Beck, and, oh, this is a bit terrifying, I've got to look after Graham Beck?
No, look, thank you so much, Dan. Look, exciting times. For me, I think it makes a lot of sense in terms of my move actually to Graham Beck and Steenberg. First of all, I'm very honored. I'm their new national brand ambassador, and it's one of the top Cap Classic in the country. And Steenberg wines, very well known in Constantia as well. But I've always said that never say no to bubbly, and I've been saying this for a long time, and I even came up with the hashtag never say no to bubbly. So when this opportunity came to me, I was like, this is the best opportunity that I can't miss in any case. And South African Cape Classic at the moment is the #1 growing category. So we need to tell the story. We need to tell people that we actually make some really, really good bubbles in the world, and also you can easily compare it with top brands from Champagne. So I'm very excited.
Yeah, your love of bubbles is well established. I think at least half of the 35 to 40 social media posts you put up each day are definitely related to bubbles. Well, where does that love come from? Because there is so much wine we can drink. Why is it bubbles that caught your eye and found a special place in your heart?
Look, that's a very easy question. Look, I'm a lover for finer things in life, and I think bubbles is one of the finest thing in life, and you put a lot of effort behind it when you are making Cap Classic. A minimum of 12 months before you actually start selling it, so you need to put in a lot of effort behind it. You need to be a patient person as well. But most importantly, I love refined, finer things in life. Hence why I'm in love with bubbles.
And in love with a brand that has done so much for South African wine for a long time now in terms of Graham Beck, which I suppose gives you two things to do. One, you've got to keep this extraordinary momentum going of a brand we know all around the world as a South African showcase. We see Nederburg Baronne everywhere, so we see Graham Beck everywhere. It is that well known. But at the same time, you've also got to keep growing it. You've also got to keep building it. So how do you work on both of those spaces at the same time?
Yeah, look, so obviously, then one thing that I've learned in life is that you never stop working hard. You know, you continue opening doors. As much as Graham Beck is known almost everywhere, we still want to continue telling the story. We want the younger crowd to start talking about Graham Beck. We want everybody to know about Graham Beck, and we want the brand to be in people's faces. So the most important thing is we'll continue pouring bubbles. We want the brand to be in front of the people's faces, and I think it's very important, especially in this in this country. At the moment, I think South Africa is one of the top champagne buyers in Africa. You know, but we've got Cape Classic that we can easily compare with champagne. So we need to tell the story. We need to educate people and tell them a lot more about Cap Classic. And I think it was a great move for the MCC Association to change the name from just MCC to Cap Classic, because the word MCC for me didn't sound anything South African. You know, you always needed to explain what is an MCC. But immediately when you say Cap Classic, it talks about South Africa. It talks about us. So now it's time to tell the story about what is a Cap Classic. Why do you call it Cap Classic? And I believe that we will soon achieve all of that. And Graham Beck is one of those benchmarks, you know, where if you're working with Mr. Bubbles Ferreira, for me, it's a no-brainer, you know, to say Graham Beck is actually the benchmark of Cap Classic in the world.
I think that's a very fair assessment. It is a brand that is now in even stronger hands with Patson. It's not the only one, though. There are a couple of others he will be running his eye over. We'll come back to those in a moment. 50 years on now, Zinaschke, you've got this brand that has done so well up until now. How much has it changed, and how much leeway do you as a winemaker have in guiding each new vintage, or is it a pretty strict set of rules that says this is Nederburg Baronne, this is what it must taste like, this is what you must do?
Dan, to answer you, I do think that a big part of the Baronne success is the fact that it was pretty much consistent over the past 50 years. And like I mentioned earlier, the leading character will always be Cabernet Sauvignon and Shiraz, and over the years we've added some other cultivars, 2 or 3 other cultivars per year, but that's at the winemaker's discretion when tasting through the components. And I think it's also important to note, I do think a lot of people, like you mentioned earlier, do know Baronne. It's very well known. And then Nederburg also does produce very big volumes of wine, but we produce ranges that cater for literally every palate out there. And if you go and look at our accolades over the past couple of years across all our ranges, it speaks book volumes of the commitment to quality that we have. So even a big blend like Baronne, just for interest's sake, if you were to calculate the number of bottles of Nederburg Baronne consumed in South Africa today, it would equate to 1 bottle opened every 15 seconds of the day. And I can assure you also that all our ranges, including Baronne, from the private bin, the smaller volumes, the niche wines, right up until our biggest blend, the Nederburg Baronne, all receive the same love, care, and attention to detail across the board. And we go through a lot of effort. It's truly a team effort. It's not just myself making the decisions, so it includes Samuel, our cellar master, and Andrea Freeberger, the head of winemaking and viticulture for Heineken. And we get together and literally taste through all the components after each harvest, make sure everything is up to standard, do the wood selections for the specific components as well, to make sure that we get to that ultimate quality and consistency in the bottle at the end of the day.
So there we go. It's now 50 years in, and it's a wine that has become as such a household regular, the fact that every 15 seconds a bottle is being opened, the maths are beyond me, but it does translate to a lot of wine being made. When you're making that sort of volume, how do you keep the consistency of, in particular, the quality of wine when it's coming out in such big numbers? How hard is that for you as a winemaker?
So, like mentioned earlier, it is a very big team effort, so it's not that hard. But I must also say that Nederburg is in the fortunate position that we have grape growers that we work with specifically. We've got 44 producers, which works hand in hand with our viticulturalist, and each block that we procure is farmed specifically for the specific SKUs that it is assigned to at the end of the day. So in terms of the viticulture, there's already consistency in how the grapes are farmed. And then, like I said, in the cellar as well, obviously from harvest time, during the fermentation, after fermentation, there's constantly tasting, rearranging, looking at the components. Are we happy? And then also like finer detail, like literally doing wood trials on each tank and each component to see what works best and what wood maturation regime are we going to use for each component.
It's also by definition a wine that is being drunk pretty quickly. You've made that point a couple of times. People are buying this wine. They're not buying it by and large to keep it for their grandchildren's 21st. It's a bottle of red wine. I want to drink it now. And yet you're working with in Cabernet Sauvignon, a wine that can often be quite tannic and prickly and a little unfriendly in its first few vintages. And Shiraz also has that potential to be a wine that does need a few years to settle down. What's the magic touch to taking two pretty big, sometimes quite aggressive red varietals and getting them into a space where I'm drinking wine that's 2 or 3 years old and I'm loving it because it's quite ready to drink?
Yes, so once again, we start out in the vineyards, and I must give a lot of credit there to our viticulturalist in determining the ideal ripeness for harvesting all our grapes at optimal ripeness for the SKUs, once again, for which we produce. And then the magic really is actually happening with the wood maturation and the wood regime, because wood plays an integral part in terms of your tannin structure and the characters that you get out of the final wine at the end of the day. And that's why I also said it's not just taking in big volumes of grapes, making big volumes of wine, chucking any wood in there. We literally taste through every single component and trial and see what works. And being in the industry for 13 years myself, and Samuel being at Nederburg for 15 years, and Andrea being in the industry as well for 20 plus years, I do think we have between us a lot of experience in tasting young wines and seeing the potential, and also with working with the different coopers and wood suppliers. We can pretty much almost, can I say, predict how the end product is going to turn out.
And that element of the wood is one that fascinates me. And as I've learned more about wine, so I've discovered it's more than just, okay, well, a first fill versus a second fill versus a third versus a fourth. The exact nature of the barrel is so particular. I'm as a winemaker, understanding the impact that such a small difference in barrel can have on a wine over the years that follow.
Sorry, Dan, I lost you there for a moment. I didn't hear half the question.
Just saying, I'm always fascinated by the impact that wood has, and my initial understanding was, well, you've got a first fill and a second and a third and a fourth, and that's pretty much it. And then you start to learn that there are actually nuances and the different types, and such a small difference in a barrel can have such a big impact on the wine that is produced. How much of that have you learned over the years, and how has your understanding of the barrel component of the wine you make influenced your approach as a winemaker?
Yeah, once again, I'm very fortunate to be working at Nederburg, and I've worked at other cellars as well during my career, working with different barrel types, different coopers, different wood suppliers. But here at Nederburg, we literally have, I always say it's a nice playground to work here. So, for instance, in the harvest cellar, we've got different tanks, different fermentation techniques that we can play around with. And then also coming back to the barrels, I have about 13 different coopers from which I've ordered barrels, also different sizes, different toasting levels, different wood regimes. We use mostly French oak in the cellar, but also some American oak and a little bit of Hungarian oak. And like you said, it isn't just a case of you chuck the wine into the barrel and there you go. Every specific barrel delivers something different to the same wine that you put in there at the end of the day. And it's really nice. Every year around about this time, we actually just finished up this week. Myself, Samuel, Andrea, and my assistant Emilia. Sorry, I've got a wine fly here. That's a sign of a good wine in the glass. So yeah, every year we spend about 1 to 2 weeks tasting through all the components in the cellar, tanks and barrels, and then the blending season kicks off because I, for instance, now have to start blending our 2022 Wine Masters range. So we've tasted through all the first, second, third, and fourth full barrels in the cellar, and yeah, it's always a lot of fun to see on the table. It's a bench. Sometimes we taste between 200 and 220 samples a day. So to get to know the different wood types and what each cooper and barrel and toasting level contributes to the wine at the end of the day is actually very amazing. And I always say to people when I conduct tastings, a winemaker uses barrels or wood as a chef would use spices to season a dish. And in essence, that is basically what we as winemakers do.
The framing of wine rather than the overwhelming and overpowering of it. It's something our winemakers do really well, and Zinaschke is a great example. But tasting 220 a day, it sounds like great fun. It sounds like you'd probably be hospitalized by the end of it, but it demands so much of the winemakers, and it's such a big part of getting the blends absolutely right. And then, of course, you have to understand them if you're in a sales position, which brings me back to Pat's and the understanding of the wine that you have. Pat, you've been in the industry for a long time now. You've worked in a number of different spaces. How much time have you had to spend? And yes, we can have a laugh. It sounds like fun. Oh, open another bottle of wine. It's work. Ha, ha, ha. But in terms of actually understanding that wine, not just throwing back a glass, but tasting it, working out what it is, realizing what it is, so that not only do you know, but that when you are now going out to sell your wine, you can explain to people exactly what it is and make sure they realize what they're getting.
Look, Dennis, it's very important. You know, I know sometimes it looks like we're just having fun, but one of the things that we've done so well as well, you know, coming from restaurant background, you know, when you are putting together a wine list, you need to focus. You are also not just testing for yourself. You are also testing for the consumer as well, so that you can be able to sell that bottle of wine, so that you can be able to understand what the consumer wants. As you know, I'm also part of the Trophy Wine Show judging panel as well, which is a fascinating judging panel. And when we do that, you know, you're testing at least sometimes up to 100 wines a day. And again, you are not just testing for yourself. You are testing for the consumer out there, so that they can be able to enjoy that bottle of wine in their own comfort zone. But also, you know, I think there's a thing that's called the winemaker's intention, and I think, you know, good example what you just mentioned with Nederburg being an easy drinking wine. I think for me, that's the winemaker's intention, because they want people to buy that wine and drink it now. So when you test all these wines, as a salesperson, you need to understand the brand and the effort that's been put behind the juice that's now in the bottle of wine, the final product. So when you go out there, you should be able to tell the story and should be able to know what actually went in behind the juice, you know. So it's a fascinating thing, especially sales, because at the end of the day, we end up becoming faces of the brand. We are the people that are always talking to the consumer out there. We are the people that are educating the consumer. We are the people that are going and doing wine trainings, waiters trainings for restaurants, also consumer trainings and food and wine pairings as well. We are the guys that are doing it. So it's very, very important that we also understand what goes in, and what happens before even they harvest the wine, the grapes. The soils, the climate, which is terroir. That's very important to know all about those things. So yeah, very very important. We spend a lot of time trying to understand the product that we are selling out there.
Just before I ask you about the Steenberg brand that you're also working on, an extension on the question about the market, the understanding of the wine, you've got two things, I guess, to understand: what your wine is, what you're trying to sell, but then also what the market is drinking, what the market wants. Don't always connect. Sometimes you've got a market that wants something, and you're trying to sell something else. How do you bridge that gap, and how important is your role, the role of people like you, to take new wine, different wine, wine that is perhaps upselling, to use a great marketing word, into the South African wine industry, and start to broaden that footprint, and to get more people drinking new and different and a wider variety of stuff?
No, look, I think the most important thing, then, is what I've just mentioned now in terms of educating people about your product. A good example, talking about Sauvignon Blanc as an example. There's a lot of wooded or barrel fermented Sauvignon Blancs coming out there now, and we see that it's becoming a trend. Same thing as Bordeaux blends, white Bordeaux blends, Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon. A lot of consumers out there, they think, they are drinking only 100% Sauvignon Blanc, but in most cases, they also drinking a white blend. But then the consumer just wants a Sauvignon Blanc because they don't know anything about Semillon. So it's all about educating people. It's all about pouring a lot more as well, and making sure that people test what you're talking about. Because, I've been in cases whereby people don't even want to open that expensive bottle of wine because it's expensive. They can't get samples. But how are you going to convince people to actually be able to buy your wines? Or how are you going to be able to sell that wine? So the most important thing is that you open those bottles, you test them with people, you do things around it. Good example, with wine bars coming up at the moment, opening those wines, serving them by the glasses as well. But also, most importantly, is how do you actually convince that market is only education.
And you are doing that education now with not just the Graham Beck brand, but also with the Steenberg brand. Has its own bubbles, so you've got a couple to juggle there. The white wines of Constantia, well established, and particularly those of Steenberg. You've also got some really interesting reds, which often in the Constantia setting don't get quite as much attention as the whites, and in Steenberg's case, the bubbles do. Tell us a little bit about where you see the Steenberg brand and where you're hoping to take it going forward.
Look, I think Steenberg is a very well-established brand. Very, very smart wines being made there. I think their bubbles for me as well is one of the top bubbles in this country. But obviously, we need to put that in. We need to tell the story. We need people to know about Steenberg. So look, I'm looking at the Sauvignon Blancs that come from that area in general, and I think Steenberg has actually put that area in the map. But it's also how we're gonna do it is with the sommeliers. We need sommeliers to think about Steenberg all the time whenever they're opening a bottle of whether it's a Sauvignon Blanc, whether it's a Chardonnay, whether it's a Merlot as well. We will make sure that we do a lot of things, especially in the food and wine scene as well, and also with the Lady R in the bubble side, that's an iconic Cap Classique. So we need to at some point sit around the table, open those bubbles on a blind testing, compare them with top-selling champagnes in this country. You'll be surprised when you do that. That's when people are being honest, because they're testing everything blind. Then they will be able to tell you that, oh, actually, I thought this was champagne. You have no idea how many times I've opened bottles of Cap Classique on a blind testing and people think it's actually champagne. And after that, the world is, is in your oyster. So you you end up selling a lot more of that because now everybody was honest about it. So we will definitely grow a Steenberg range. I think at the moment, it's a little bit. Sometimes people think it's too fancy, but we will make sure that it's not that fancy. You're still able to enjoy a bottle of Steenberg, whether you're having something to eat or not. Whether you're just going for a picnic, you can actually open a nice bottle of Steenberg wines. The Catarina, the red blend, amazing wine. The Merlot. I was never a huge fan of Merlot because sometimes in this country it used to be too green, same as Sauvignon Blanc. But I think we are doing very well, especially cool climate Sauvignon Blanc and cool climate Merlot is really, really doing well at the moment. So we will tell the story about it. Look, I've only been with the Beck family stats for how long? I think it's my fifth day today. So it's still very, very new to me. But I've known the brands for a very, very long time. So it was very easy for me to accept the offer as well.
Just to go back to your word on trying to make the perception of Steenberg a little less fancy, I'm not sure that employing the aristocrat of Johannesburg wine tasting that is Patson is the right way to do that. I think you've made it look even more fancy by employing Patson, but I don't think it's going to hurt. Tell me quickly before we jump back to Zinaschke, the Capensis brand, is that going to fall under you as well?
Most definitely. I'm looking forward to telling the story about the Capensis as well, because I think the quality in that wine is amazing. So it's definitely part of my portfolio as well.
Again, I think it's a brand that we don't talk about as much as we should. So we'll set aside some time to bring Capensis onto the show in the coming months and have a chat about that. Zinaschke, heading back to you and to the Nederburg team, and I emphasize team because you emphasize team, and you're very good to pass on so much credit to all of your colleagues. But I know you do play a big role in that and in guiding this particular wine. As you see it, you're at the half-century mark. What does the future look like for you for Baronne, and what does the future look like for you for Nederburg, given that things are all a little changed now that it's goodbye to Stell and it's now Zinaschke at Heineken.com instead?
Dan, before I answer you, I just want to note something. So Patson said in the beginning of the interview that he likes the finer things in life. So I just want to put this out there. So he was part of the judging panel then that scored the 2021 Baronne 91 points at the Trophy Wine Show this year. And it was also included in the best value rates. So I just want to put that out there.
A good point to make, Zinaschke. A good point to make.
Thanks, Patson. Yes, getting back to the future for Baronne, I'm really hoping that, I don't know if the viewers can see the bottle next to me, but we've done a nice, just trying to get my angle right here on the camera. So we've done a nice pack upgrade for the 50th celebration. And my hope for the future is that people will be buying even more of this because of the consistent quality, so that we can change that little sentence that I quoted earlier to one bottle opened every 10 seconds in South Africa. And answering you about Heineken, we are very, very excited about the new opportunities that lie ahead. We're hoping that they are going to really help us uplift the brand and open some new markets in other areas for us, so that we can continue our award-winning legacy.
And with people like Patson and the Trophy Wine Show giving a very, very approachable, accessible wine, price point and drinking wise, 91 points at the Trophy Wine Show. It's a legacy that is firmly heading in the right direction. Patson, just quickly, I know you're less than a week into the new job, but broadly speaking, if I was to sit down with you in a year's time and say, right, you've had your first year on the job and you've nailed everything you wanted to do, what would that be? What are the aims for that first year, taking over the new role and looking after three very, very acclaimed brands?
Look, it's a big challenge for me, because also you might know this, but the Beck family estates has gone in-house. We've we've left DGB now, so look, obviously the challenge for me is how we actually get the wine to the people, and we will make sure that we grow the brand. We want to revive this brand a lot more as well. Look, it's always been a good brand, but I think also with the new guys coming on board in terms of the new wine drinkers as well. People want to drink a lot more Cap Classique, more local. We need again to tell the story. So for me, my first year is to grow the brand and make sure that people talk about Graham Beck and Steenberg, and we should be the bubbly of choice in this country, and we should be the wine of choice when it comes to Steenberg. We want to be in people's mouths every time they talk about Cap Classique. We want them to talk about Graham Beck. Every time they think about Cap Classique, they should be thinking about Graham Beck. Whenever they think about Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, and Merlot from Constantia, everybody should be thinking about Steenberg. So that's my focus. That's my goal for this year. So hopefully, maybe in the next year, I come back to this show again. We talk about what we've achieved and see if everybody is now drinking Graham Beck and Steenberg only. I know, look, just joking, but more South African wines, but we should be the wine of choice.
Well, I don't think they'll be drinking them only because they're going to be opening a bottle of Baronne every 10 seconds, according to Zinaschke. But it's a great combination, and I think to both of you, to have you on the show this evening, you both speak to two really important parts of our wine industry. Zinaschke, with that part of the family that is the Nederburg Baronne for so many South African households, and Patson for a really, I think, still affordable, but definitely high quality brand that has now got some real energy behind it. And I love talking about brands that are doing so well, not just because it's great for you guys in your own right, but the better you do, the more you lift up everybody around you, and the more you lift up our industry. And I think that is what I always get a sense South African wine people want. They want everyone to succeed and to do well, because that means we're all triumphing as a result. So thank you, Zinaschke. I think you've got more celebrations to come. I know there's a lot happening around the Nederburg Baronne, and the fact that you have hit 50. The new packaging does look fantastic. I've seen it in person. So good luck with Project 10 Seconds, which is underway. And Patson, I know we're going to be drinking some wine together soon, which I always look forward to. But good luck with the new job, and thank you both, because you both charge into the wine space with big smiles, some great love of wine, and you both do a great job at what you do. So thank you for being on the show, and I look forward to having you back again soon.
Thank you very
for
much.
having us, Dan.
There we go. Zinaschke Steyn, winemaker down at Nederburg, and Mandla Mathonsi, who was until recently with Spear, has now moved across as a national brand ambassador for Graham Beck, for Steenberg, and for Capensis, one of the more gregarious individuals in South African wine. Plenty being celebrated on the show today. There are more celebrations coming tomorrow as we raise a glass of Donovan Roll to his new vintages and see what has come out of the Swartland from the big friendly giant of South African wine. And we will also be keeping a close eye on that NFT sale with Strauss. Can they pull in the big numbers they're hoping for? It's some terrific wine. Yes, it's expensive, but very, very rare to see collections quite like that. Head over to Strauss for a look if you are interested, and I'm sure you are. And then just finally, here's a quick word from my good friend Tendai Mtawarira, the Beast, who said goodbye rugby and hello wine, as he prepares to see his new project take flight with a little help from Norman Goodfellows. The brand new wine from Beast, Tendai Mtawarira's collection, is headlined by this: 50% Cab, 50% Syrah, 100% Gerard Holden. Well, who on earth is he? He's actually somebody with a pretty cool story, because not only, like you, does he love wine, but he also played a bit of international rugby, just not quite so much or quite as famously as you did.
Yes, I know that Gerard, is a rugby man, and I think that's where we kind of hit it off. and we got that connection, from the onset. And I think obviously in terms of winemaking, he's a brilliant winemaker with a lot of awards, to back it up. And for me to have him, making this red blend for me is an absolute bonus. We obviously partnered, on making this red blend, and it kind of defines me as an individual. Obviously it's very bold. It's smooth around the edges, and I tend to be like that. When you look at me, you're kind of intimidated because of the boldness, but when you come closer, I'm actually quite a well-polished and gentle, giant. So this wine kind of speaks to that. It speaks to who I am. And there's a story here, when you look at the bottle of wine, the eagle in the front is actually my family crest, or my family totem. So it tells the story of who I am and where I come from. So, we just didn't, want to bring out something that doesn't tell a story. So there is a story to this bottle. The back label will also give you a description of what you're going to enjoy when you partake, when you have a glass of this red blend. So yeah, I'm very, honored to be working with Jared Holden, and has become a very close friend as well as obviously business partner. And we want to take this, this wine to the world. That's our vision, to take it globally, and starting off here in South Africa.
Well, if you've had the wine of Holden Mance, you'll know the style of Gerard and his team out of Franschhoek, but you want to get a bottle yourself to see exactly what the beast feels is the wine just for him. And as he says, it's big and it's bold, but it's quite warm and friendly as well, and available now at Norman Goodfellows. So there we go. This month's competition with Dan Really Likes Wine. Get a bottle at Norman Goodfellows, either in-store or online, or buy a bottle through the Dan Really Likes Wine store into the draw, and a signed case of the Beast's new wine, that Cab Syrah blend going back to 2016. Is all yours. Great competition, great wine, get shopping. That does it for this evening. Huge thank you to Zinaschke and to Patson for joining me. Best of luck to both of them as the celebrations continue for different but equally important reasons. I will see you back again on the show on Monday. And if you haven't seen it this week, the magazine show sitting on all of our usual channels, your chance to catch up with some great wine stories. Those are sitting online now, and yeah, get over and have a watch. So that does it for this evening. I'm off to celebrate my daughter's 9th birthday party with some 2014 wine, a little Nederburg Baronne, and possibly a bottle of Graham Beck. See you next week. Goodbye.